How does a man become impossible to remove after just one night on your couch? October 14th, 9:42 p.m. A quiet townhouse in Franklin County, Ohio. She unlocked the door believing she was offering mercy, not rewriting her life. The porch light flickered against early frost. Grant Whitaker stood there with one duffel bag and a tired smile. Brielle Dawson hesitated for 3 seconds too long. By sunrise, something had shifted inside her home and inside her son, and she wouldn't recognize it until it was too late. She met Grant 6 months earlier through a mutual friend. He wasn't violent. He wasn't loud. He was the kind of man who explained his misfortunes in calm paragraphs. Laid off. Short-term contract collapsed. Staying with a cousin who needed space. He didn't ask for much. Just one night. Mason was already asleep upstairs. Brielle made up the couch. She told herself kindness wasn't a liability. At 10:16 p.m., Harper texted, "You sure about this?" Brielle typed back, "It's just one night." She didn't know that sentence would follow her into interviews later. Grant showered. He folded his jacket carefully over the dining chair. He thanked her twice. Nothing felt wrong. That's what she would say later. Brielle woke before her alarm. The house felt occupied. Grant was already in the kitchen. Coffee brewed. Dishes rinsed. Mason sitting at the counter, listening. "Your mom works too hard," Grant said softly. "She shouldn't carry everything alone." Brielle laughed it off. It sounded harmless. But Mason didn't laugh. Why did a 9-year-old grow quiet after one breakfast? Grant didn't leave that morning. He said the cousin wasn't answering. He said he'd try again by noon. He offered to fix a loose cabinet hinge. But one detail didn't add up. He'd told her he worked construction. Yet his hands were unmarked. No cuts. No grit under his nails. Small thing. Easy to ignore. By afternoon, Derek Shaw next door noticed a new car parked longer than expected. By evening, Mason asked if the man was staying again. Not Grant. The man. At 8:41 p.m., Brielle received a call from an unknown number. She stepped outside to take it. When she came back in, Grant was standing at the base of the staircase. Not moving. Just watching the hallway where Mason's room was. Grant Whitaker, Franklin County. That night, Brielle locked her bedroom door. She had never done that before, and she told herself she was overreacting. But 3 days later, when detectives would sit across from her at the county building, they wouldn't ask why she let him stay. They would ask why she didn't ask him to leave. When does just one more day quietly become control? Grant was still there. His duffel bag had moved from the couch to the hallway closet. His shoes were by the door, lined up like they belonged. His voice carried through rooms like he'd memorized the walls. Brielle told herself it was temporary. But temporary things don't start rearranging your kitchen. Mason stopped asking questions. He started watching. Grant began driving him to school. Said it was helping out. Said Brielle looked exhausted. Why did he step in so fast? Before anyone asked him to. Harper noticed first. "You sound different," she said over the phone. Brielle denied it. But she had begun lowering her voice inside her own house. Small shift. Big impact. Grant paid for groceries one night. He left the receipt on the counter, circled total in pen. "I've got us," he said. That word lingered longer than it should have. 3 nights turned into 5. The cousin story stopped coming up. The job applications stopped being mentioned. The conversations became about routines. What Mason should eat. What time lights should go out. How the thermostat was too high. And then something subtle but permanent happened. Grant answered Brielle's phone when it rang. It was Harper. He smiled and said, "She's resting." Brielle was standing 2 feet away. Control doesn't announce itself. That night, Mason asked a question so quietly it almost disappeared. "Mom, does he live here now?" Brielle opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She realized she didn't know how to ask him to leave without starting something. And that fear, it hadn't been there before. But the moment that changed everything wasn't loud. It was silent. The next morning, Brielle went to grab her spare house key from the ceramic bowl near the door. It wasn't there. She didn't remember moving it. Grant was in the kitchen, smiling. One night. That's all she agreed to. So why did it already feel like she needed permission in her own home? What happens the first time you ask someone to leave? And they smile instead. Brielle waited until Mason left for school. The house felt tight, smaller than before. I think it's time, she said carefully. You've had a week. Grant didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He leaned against the counter and looked at her like she'd made a small mistake. A week, he said softly. I've been helping you. Helping. The word pressed against her ribs. Why did she suddenly feel like she owed him something? He listed what he'd done. Groceries, school rides, fixing the hinge. Stability for your son. Stability. As if she hadn't built this life herself. But one detail shifted. I can stay somewhere else, he said calmly. But Mason asked if I was leaving. He doesn't want me to. Her stomach dropped. Mason never said that. Did he? For a second, doubt slipped in. That second mattered. Grant picked up his duffel bag. Walked to the door. Paused. You don't have to push away the only person trying to stand with you. Then he set the bag back down. Not by the couch. By the stairs. That night, Brielle lay awake replaying the conversation. Did she imagine the edge in his tone? Did Mason really say that? Why did the house feel heavier, even though nothing dramatic had happened? The next morning, her spare key was back in the ceramic bowl. Exactly where it belonged. She never saw him return it. And for the first time, she realized this wasn't about needing a place to sleep. It was about planting himself where he couldn't be easily removed. How do you warn someone when they refuse to see it themselves? Harper stopped by unexpectedly. She froze in the doorway. The living room looked normal, yet something felt off. Grant sat on the couch. Mason was reading quietly, but Brielle couldn't ignore the tight tension in her chest. Why did the air feel heavier when nobody was speaking? Harper whispered, Brielle, he's not just visiting anymore, is he? Brielle's hands trembled. She wanted to say no. She wanted to believe it was temporary. But the folded shoes by the stairs and the way Grant moved through her home said otherwise. Small details that hurt. Grant had labeled the spice jars alphabetically. He rearranged the books on Mason's shelf. And the spare bedroom door was slightly ajar, though she never left it open. That night, Brielle watched Mason sleep. She noticed how he flinched when Grant came in with coffee. A quiet fear she hadn't noticed before. Harper begged her to act. Call someone. Set boundaries. Brielle whispered to herself, I don't even know how to start. And then, a knock came at the door. Not urgent. Not loud. Just deliberate. Grant was standing there. Watching. Waiting. What do you do when kindness becomes a trap? Brielle closed the bedroom door behind her. Heart pounding. Mason was asleep, unaware. Grant stood in the hallway, calm, silent, watching. Why did the quiet feel heavier than any argument ever could? She stepped into the kitchen. Grant, you need to leave, she said, voice shaking. He didn't flinch, didn't argue. He smiled, faint, almost gentle, and said, I thought I was helping. Did you want me to stop? The words that freeze you. Brielle's hands gripped the counter. She realized she wasn't asking a guest to leave. She was confronting someone who had rewritten her home. Small things struck her first. The photos on the shelf slightly moved. The cereal boxes rotated like someone was studying habits. Mason's backpack, packed in a way she didn't recognize. Fear settled in her chest. Not from violence. Not from loud threats. From knowing he had learned the rhythm of their life and intended to stay. She wanted to scream. She wanted to beg. She wanted Mason to stay safe. But the truth hit her cold. She had invited him in, and now she couldn't make him leave. How do you fight someone who doesn't need to raise a hand? Brielle watched Mason doing homework at the kitchen table. Grant hovered nearby, offering helpful suggestions. Each word he spoke subtly shifted the rhythm of the house. Why did Mason stop asking for her attention and start glancing at Grant first? Harper called again. Brielle, you need to see it. He's controlling more than you realize. Brielle forced a laugh. But inside, she knew it was true. The grocery lists, the morning routines, even bedtime. Grant had mapped it all without anyone noticing. Small moves, big impact. That night, Brielle tried to take back the bedroom. Grant entered without knocking, sat quietly, and simply smiled. No argument, no loud confrontation, just presence. Presence that made her chest tighten. Mason asked if Grant could read him a story. Brielle's throat tightened. Her own son trusting him already, and she felt invisible in her own home. Outside, Derek Shaw noticed Grant's car parked late again. He made a call, and for the first time, someone beyond the walls of that house started paying attention. How do you stop someone when they've already rewritten your life? Forever? Brielle woke to silence. Too quiet. Mason's bed was empty. She found him in the hallway, cold. Grant standing over him, eyes dark, but calm. Everything she feared had happened in those small, quiet shifts she ignored. How could one night turn into a life-ending nightmare? Detectives Lucas Bennett and Brianna Holt arrived within the hour. Sergeant Reeves and ADA Colin Mercer coordinated. The scene was somber. Every tiny detail, the misaligned shoes, the rearranged kitchen, now mattered. Justice in motion. Forensic evidence, eyewitness accounts, and digital tracking revealed Grant's manipulation from the first night. By trial, the truth was undeniable. He had never intended to leave. Brielle's life could not be restored. Mason was gone. The silence that had once felt normal now screamed in memory. But justice was served. Grant Whitaker was sentenced. Life without parole. Every lie, every quiet move, accounted for. No one could ever undo the loss, but accountability brought a measure of closure. The veil of secret where truth meets justice. For Brielle, the grief never ended. For Mason, there was no more fear. For the audience, the story stays with you. The quiet, the dread, the weight of kindness betrayed, all remembered. Subscribe to The Veil of Secret for more deeply emotional stories where justice meets the darkest truths.